You're listening to CX Passport, the show about creating great customer experiences with a dash of travel talk. Each episode, we'll talk with our guests about great CX, travel, and just like the best journeys, explore new directions we never anticipated. I'm your host, Rick Denton. I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Let's get going. Today's guest has some interesting moments in his career. From shaking things up at a first job in a customer-focused way, to being told, "You're kind of disruptive, aren't you?" To a massive viral post about the 10 requirements of a customer journey map, today's guest, Jim Tincher, founder and CEO of Heart of the Customer, lives and breathes the customer. When I got the chance to meet with Jim, we ran out of time because we were talking customer. It's so exciting to have an opportunity to learn from someone with such a heart for, a brain for, and action matters, the hands for customer experience. Jim recently authored a new book, Do B2B Better, which comes out the day this episode releases, CX Day, October 4th, 2022. We'll have a chance to talk more about why Jim thinks we need to do B2B better and how we can do it. Spoiler, you know it's going to focus heavily on the customer. Also, when you hear customer experience, you probably think traditional business, right? But what about the nonprofit space, especially across borders? What would customer experience look like there? We'll find out soon. Jim, welcome to CX Passport.
Thanks, Rick. Great to be here.
Looking forward to this. So I mentioned this in the intro, that first job. I got a chuckle when you were telling me about that before. You suggested to your manager that you wanted to visit a customer. Right from the beginning, you were customer focused. How did that go over with your boss at the time?
I would say confusing. He really had no idea why I would want to visit a customer, why that was important to me. I was going out to Connecticut to visit my then girlfriend, now wife. And yeah, I wanted to say, well, while I'm there, I'd like to visit a customer. We sold high resolution printers at that time. And so I wanted to see who was actually using it and how they're using it. And just wanted to be introduced to a client while I was there. And yeah, it was confusing. And he eventually just told, well, actually, I did get a chance to meet with them. Yeah. It took a little pushing, which is kind of a theme of my career. Yeah, but I was able to actually visit a customer, which is great.
It seems so weird now to think that that would be met with resistance. Why do you think there was sort of this, well, why on earth would you want to meet with a customer? What do you think was behind that?
Oh, I don't think that has gotten better. Really, I think that is still, at many organizations, you want to talk to the customer, I think that is confusing. Why should we spend that money? Why should we go out there and do that? I would want to believe it's gotten all better, but I'm not at all certain it has. But yeah, I think at that point it was just so oddball. I was in technical support, not really where you look for somebody to be a customer-focused person, I guess. And so it was just unusual. And yeah, but again, as I've talked to other people, I think that has not changed.
That disappoints me a little bit because I want to think, maybe it's because I live inside this CX world, right? And I clearly know the value of wanting to talk to the customer and get the insight from the customer. And heck, I built my whole company around voice of the customer and getting that sense of what the customer is and who they are and what they want and using that to create actual business value. But I suppose you're right. There's still plenty of that. We can figure out what the customer is, or we can guess what it is. We know what's better in the boardroom. And why bother talking to the customer? So maybe I think it's gotten better, but as you point out, maybe not as good as I want it to have been by now.
So one of the things, we did over 200 hours of interviews getting ready for this book. And I remember distinctly one where we were interviewing people at Legrand AV. And Legrand is a global organization. The AV department is headquartered here in the Twin Cities. And Lori Englert arranged for us to interview 6 of her staff. And we finished 4 interviews, and we were on a bit of a break. I turned to Diane Schnitker from our team, and I said, there's something here. I'm not sure what it is, but there's something different. And she said, I know what it is. It's obvious. Well, what is it? Everybody we've talked to referenced talking to a customer sometime in the last few weeks.
Nice.
And I recognized that was different. And so I started making that a question in our interviews, saying, well, when's the last time you talked to a customer? And Rick, the answer I got back was really disappointing because we're talking to customer experience people who care about customers. That's one thing about our tribe is that we are passionate about customers.
Yeah, right.
But very few had actually talked to a customer recently, which just blew me away. I'd ask people, say, well, when's the last time you talked to a customer? Well, we did a survey last month. No. When's the last time you talked with a customer? And highly variable. I think about Catherine Molnier at Hildy in Paris. She talked about all the time talking with customers. People whose names I won't mention say, well, I think last year I talked to one. And it would just surprise me, but we get so caught up in our day-to-day about using surveys, and surveys are important.
Right.
They are a tool in the toolbox, but they are not the toolbox. And that physical talking to customers is so important. And I talked to Catherine early in the pandemic, and I loved what she said, which is that now, thanks to the pandemic, it's just as easy for me to talk to somebody in China as it is to talk to somebody here in Paris.
Very true.
They're both on the opposite end of a Zoom. And she used this as an opportunity to expand who she talked to and to get a broader sense of customers, which is fantastic and something we should all do.
That actually makes some sense to me when you say that, like the actual literal talking to a customer. It is surprising, though, for me to hear that in so many of your interviews that those who were dedicated to customer experience had not. And you're right. There's many ways that we hear from our customers. Surveys. I too am on board with surveys, right? I'm not anti-survey, although I've recognized their diminishing importance. But the customer speaks to us in many, many different ways. The calls that they have coming in, you observe their behavior in their website, or actually in the real world if you're in a real world scenario. And what does that look like? But nothing ever replaces that actual human to human conversation that takes place in a customer conversation. Jim, you mentioned the book, and I do want to talk about the book in this Do B2B Better. And I will say, listeners, it is completely serendipitous timing. There was a fellow CX colleague that introduced Jim and me together. We got to talking. We wanted to have Jim on the show, and boom, realized, hey, that works to have it come out when the book comes out. Pure serendipity here, and I like it. But one thing you mentioned to me is you'd said we live in this environment where Forrester says that 1 out of every 4 customer roles will lose their job. Maybe it's because they weren't talking to their customer, but we'll say that for a bit. Yeah. But you've shared wisdom on how to do things better in the book. Tell me about the book, and what do you want people to learn from it?
Well, it comes back to when I was a customer experience leader, and I failed. I did not drive change. I was shocked when I joined this organization that literally nobody in marketing or product development had ever met a client. And we were the nation's leader in health savings accounts. And I just kept saying our customers are frustrated, because I was out talking to them and really getting a handle of what they're feeling. And the answer came back, no, they're not. We're leading the nation in sales. How can they be so frustrated? Because we're winning so many. And I would have been far more successful if I just added 7 words to my talk track, which is our customers are frustrated and it's costing us millions of dollars. If I'd added those words, I'd have had way more impact. But I started and ended with customers, and it became just an argument back and forth of whether our customer is frustrated or not. But while we led the nation in sales, we also led the nation in the percentage of customers who were canceling their accounts. Mm-hmm. And if I'd leveraged that to say there's millions of dollars that we are missing out because of our complexity, I'd had way more impact. But I didn't know that for years later. I didn't understand why I wasn't having impact. And this book is a mission to understand why are some programs, and similarly, it's typically 1 out of 4. If you look at Point-A-List, you look at Customer Think, you look at our own research, essentially 1 program out of 4 can show they're impacting the business. It can actually prove business impact. And I want to understand, what are those 1 out of 4 doing differently? And talked to my team back in January of 2020, saying, let's talk to customer experience leaders. Let's find out why. And we said, okay, we'll talk to 25. I said, no, we got to talk to 50. 50, why? And eventually I said, well, it's got to be 100. 100? You don't need to do that. Well, yeah, we did. So again, it was over 200 hours of interviews by the time we were done. What I learned, I've not found elsewhere. And so I couldn't get out of my head. I had to share what Jen, Roxy, Darren, as well as dozens of others are doing that's not part of the standard talk track about customer experience.
I look forward to getting a chance to learn from that, because we've seen so much wisdom out there, right? There's plenty of, and I'm using air quotes here, right? CX wisdom and CX thought that is out there. And so what were some of the things that, if you don't mind tipping your hand a little bit, but what were some of the things that really caught you off guard, that actually surprised you? Multi-decade experience in customer experience. What surprised you in these conversations?
Well, the first one didn't at first surprise me. There are 4 actions we discovered. The first one is actively tying to business value. And you say, well, right. That's not the surprise, but how it was done.
Okay.
Talking about specifically bringing the financial data into the survey analysis tool and being able to report on not just, and I've seen a lot of organizations do this. Well, last year, the detractors had a higher level of attrition than the promoters. Okay? Base level analysis, it's useful, not so actionable, but at least it shows some impact. But instead, these organizations were showing, for example, how order velocity improved based on not typically net promoter score, could have been, but looking at, for example, one that Roxy speaks to is that when the caller says that on a service issue, when the caller says that the agent was knowledgeable, that's a driver question. It's not the top level question, driver question. Then that customer has different behavior going forward. They're far more likely to use self-service, saving the company money. And so she's bringing this richness in to show specifically, we've saved, when we have more knowledgeable reps, we save this much money.
Okay.
A very different. That was number one. Number two, though, was one that surprised me. We all know emotions are important.
Right.
Well, we know that's critical. And when I speak at a conference, I'll do a poll, say, what is most important in terms of customer loyalty? Is it effectiveness? Is it ease? Is it emotions? Or is it likelihood to recommend? And the last one is not a thing, but people will choose that because they like that.
Well, we've heard the phrase so many times in this world, right?
Yeah.
It's a knee-jerk reaction. Likelihood to recommend. Got to do it.
Right. Well, I love The Effortless Experience. It's a great book. It's not what matters.
Okay.
And when you go back and look at the book and you read the methodology, it becomes clear why. Now, for those who've not read the book, or as a reminder for those who have, they say that if you want to create loyalty, then you don't need to create a wow. You just need to reduce effort. What most people don't remember is their research methodology was people in service recovery.
Okay.
Calls to the contact center.
Got it.
And that is a distinct part of the experience. It's very different. And what we learned is that, and again, we talk primarily to B2B brands, is that the great programs are actually creating an emotional North Star. They've identified one emotion that leads to those business outcomes we talked about earlier and become their design target. When I was speaking with Jen from Dow at a conference, she shared with me that they measure effectiveness, ease, and emotion, which I knew. And they have discovered when they look at the financial impacts of loyalty, they look at customers who order more often and order more different types of products and stay longer. The best predictor is enjoyability. They enjoy working with Dow much more than effectiveness or ease. So they look at ease, that's one of their things they measure, but they found it's less predictive than enjoyability. And when I first met Dan, who is their chief commercial officer, Dan Futter, he wrote the foreword to our book. He said, Jim, we were working on the complaints journey. He said, I want to create a complaints journey that's enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? An enjoyable, a chemical complaints experience that's enjoyable, but they did it because that was their North Star. Roxy, she speaks about how confidence is their emotional North Star.
Okay.
Now, as a reminder, Roxy works for UKG. They do payroll and other HR software.
Right.
And so confidence
is
really
going to be a big deal.
Oh, yeah. And they show that when customers are confident, that they're far more likely to buy additional products. They're far more likely to stay with UKG, and they actually have a lower cost to serve. If you are not creating an environment where customers want to spend more with you, they want to stay longer, and they want to engage in ways that are less expensive to you and to them, well, then we're doing our work wrong.
Right.
And so few programs can prove that's actually the outcome of their work.
This is your captain speaking. I want to thank you for listening to CX Passport today. We've now reached our cruising altitude, so I'll turn that seatbelt sign off. While you're getting comfortable, hit that follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. Love it if you'd tell a friend about CX Passport, leave a review so others can discover the show as well. Now, sit back and enjoy the rest of the episode.
Fidelity of their transactional measurement asks, which of these emotions do you feel working with us?
Yeah.
Compassion International, they are a client of ours. They did this before we started working with them. They have a 4-part measurement that can predict whether or not you stay a sponsor. What they do is you are able to sponsor children in other countries to release them from poverty. And they have found that a 4 questions, likely to recommend, satisfaction, as well as delight and happiness, predict that. And so they use emotional North Stars to use to design their work and to measure it.
Jim, I actually want to get back to Compassion International. This is a whole interesting section to me in the sense that, so much about what we talk about when it comes to surveys or scores or business value is so logic oriented. And emotions that you're describing here are typically not very logic oriented. Yet these companies that you've had the conversations with have found a way to tie emotion to this business value, this tangible business value. It's this combining of the right and left brain that sounds particularly intriguing. What do you think of it? Do you feel like these are particularly interesting cases in one side of the B2B spectrum, or is this something that could be applied on the wider B2B spectrum?
Oh, I can certainly see it applied anywhere. We have a client, a different software company. I haven't mentioned them. And they look for people to buy more products. They don't have a retention issue. Their product is such that it's really hard to replace them. The only time they lose a client really is because of a merger or acquisition.
Okay.
When we look at likelihood to buy more, as well as actual buying, we tested out 6 different emotions. We found for them, again, confidence was very predictive of likelihood to buy. Frustration, lowered likelihood to buy. Exhaustion,
huh?
Was, the client said they're exhausted, likely to buy because almost 0. Cost of service goes way up because they're exhausted. They're calling in all the time. They're not using self-service. They're too tired to use self-service. Right. They'll call instead. And so all these financial outcomes happen differently depending on the emotions you create in your customer.
This is really, really interesting. And I know the book is B2B focused, but I'm sitting here thinking about how many times I've been exhausted as a customer, may not have even identified it as an emotion, and how that has, I'm specifically thinking of the airline industry, but anyway, we'll leave that off to the side, but how that has left me with certain brands in the air that I love and certain brands that I have completely fired from my domestic business as a result. And that emotion is a lot of why I'm making that decision. I might not have been able to quantify that I was exhausted or frustrated or felt that there was a lack of trust or whatever all those things are, but it was the emotion that was driving the business choices that I'm making with my wallet.
Oh, exactly. And none of the 4 actions are specific to B2B. But I'm just tired of reading about Amazon, Zappos, Warby Parker. Those are all great brands.
Let's move on, though. Yes.
Well, yeah. I mean, so Jen at Dow can't really use a Warby Parker example very well.
Right.
They have a completely different environment. And so it's targeted B2B and B2B2C.
Yeah.
Insurance, for example, that is a different type of experience, but you don't find very many examples out there.
Well, now we're going to have a nice thing to have on our shelves after we've consumed it to understand this. Now, I did say that I want to go back and talk about Compassion International because that was something that caught my eye. I actually didn't at the time when I hit play on this recording. I didn't know that was a client of yours, but I saw you recently share a post about a customer experience leader there at Compassion International, and it was one of those I thought, I really hadn't thought of the NGO, the non-governmental organization world, focused on customer experience. So how would you say customer experience impacts that NGO world?
Well, first of all, it better work because every dollar they spend on us is a dollar not feeding a child. And
Yes.
so they are hyper focused at showing the impact. And they wouldn't say business impact, but that's essentially what it is. They want to know that every dollar they invest in customer experience is resulting in $3 to $5 elsewhere in the program. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things they look at is retention, and they find that if they're creating happiness and delight in their sponsors, they're likely to stay sponsors and therefore keep funding children. And so it's really a lot of customer experience is considered to be an art. I'm far more interested in the science of it. And for them, it is science. Yes, happiness is a right brain answer or a left brain answer, but they're using the right brain to say, we see that when happiness goes up on a survey, the behaviors we want as an organization, which is saving children from poverty, are furthered. And so once we know that, how can we do anything but try to create better happiness?
Yeah. So in that NGO world, do they, because that makes sense, the happiness that focus on that, but is it the same kind of, hey, let's develop our external closed loop feedback process when there's something that's gone awry, our internal closed loop feedback, our using various customer listening posts, is it that same kind of discipline? I mean, as you're saying it, I feel like I'm about to have a duh moment, but it just had never hit me before that these are worlds that truly will focus on customer experience similarly to what the for-profit business world does.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's very much some of those same processes of making sure that you do close the loop on a sponsor because you want to keep the sponsor happy so they will save more children. It's not about the financial impact that Compassion is more profitable because clearly they're a nonprofit. It means that their mission is furthered, which really should be true for all of us. One of the, to step aside from Compassion just for a minute, one of the key outcomes for Dow is not, yes, they look at order velocity, categories ordered, but what they really get excited about is new to the world innovation. Mm-hmm. And they can show a direct line between enjoyability with Dow and clients who will do joint innovation with them. That's that's their mission. And customer experience ties right to the mission. Most programs can't show that their work is furthering the mission of the organization.
Now, Jim, we're talking about these massive companies, Dow. We're talking about even Compassion International, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity to travel around the world and see the world and enjoy all that is there, but it can be a little exhausting. So I'd like to do a little change of pace here. Have you join me in the first class lounge? We will move quickly here and hopefully have a little bit of fun. What is a dream travel location from your past?
From my past was probably went to Barcelona. That was a fabulous trip. Really enjoyed the experience there. It was fantastic.
Great food, beautiful city.
Oh, yeah.
The architecture is stunning. Okay. I'm just sitting here going, I want to go to Barcelona. Wait, no, I've got a podcast to record here. I'm visualizing. What is a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
I grew up as a Greek mythology nerd. I would love to go to Athens and all throughout Greece. My youngest child, he got to go on a trip to Istanbul, Troy, Athens, nice. Sparta. I'm very jealous. That was about 10 years ago. And I would love to do that.
That would be quite the dream, wouldn't it? Now, both of those cultures, the Barcelona, the Spanish, the Catalan, all of that culture and the Greek culture, known for their food. So what's a favorite thing to eat? Oh,
my favorite would be pinchos, I think is saying right, in Barcelona, where it was different kinds of food, where you could eat a lot. You counted the sticks when you were done. That's how many euros you paid. I know I'm cheating, but it was all these different kinds of food that were fabulous. We also got to learn about Spanish ham. And that is nothing like what I grew up in Iowa. There is nothing in common besides maybe a little bit of the color. That is a completely different type of meat. And it was so good.
I am laughing because by the time this episode releases, the episode I'm referencing now will have already come out. But at this point, it's not. Only I know about it and the guest. But my last guest just talked about jamón and how awesome.
Yes.
So I'm laughing a little bit about how, oh my gosh, I'd never discussed this. And now it's coming up all the time. But yes, a brilliant thing. Now let's go the other way. What is the thing your parents forced you to eat, but you hated as a kid?
Potato soup. Oh,
Really?
potato soup. Flour, water, flour, and potatoes.
Oh, okay. So I'm thinking baked potato
No,
soup, which
no,
is a little
no,
different.
no,
Okay.
no. It was yeah, that was something I could not, I just did not like at all. Of course there were the standard green things, but potato soup was a staple of my mom's. And no, that was not okay with me. We do not eat potato soup anymore.
I
To
love it.
paraphrase George Bush, he said, "I'm the president, I'm not eating broccoli. I'm a grown up, I'm not eating potato soup."
I love it. Brilliant. I support you in that. What is one travel item, not including your phone, you will not leave home without?
Um, let's see. It's kind of a boring answer, but it would be a converter. But let's go with something more interesting.
I've had a converter as an answer before.
Rick Steves' travel guide. That we used that in Barcelona. We also used it in England and Ireland. It is fantastic. You get introduced to things that you never would have gone to. So Rick Steves' travel guide.
Jim, you mentioned being in the health insurance or the medical space before. And that's an area not really associated with great customer experience. And you alluded to some of that when you were describing it earlier, but you'd mentioned a phrase to me when we talked earlier. Hug your customers.
Yes.
Tell me about what you wanted to do with those hugs and what changed as a result of those hugs.
So when I was at the organization, I started out as a product guy. And I led the nation's largest land health savings accounts. And what I learned was that for an individual who was on the right health plan and whose company was offering hundreds of dollars, 1 out of 7 wasn't opening the account. They were turning that deliberately, but they were saying no to hundreds of dollars of free money.
Yeah.
And as a bank, that was money that would be in our accounts. That's where we get our profit. And we didn't know why. We did all the analysis. We looked at every demographic, age, income, education. None of it mattered except where you worked. And there are 2 retailers in town. I'm in Minneapolis, so Minneapolitans will know who I mean when I talk about the red versus the blue retailer. And the red retailer is at 93%, average balance of $1,200. The blue is at 53% opening the account, average balance of $333. We didn't know why. And so I could put together a program called Hug Your Customers, where I'd take people out and to meet customers. And first of all, first thing I learned is don't call the program Hug Your Customers. Because one of the sales reps used that with our customers. It was awkward because Minnesotans, we don't hug. That was a little awkward there. But what we learned when we went out and did that is we visited all these really excellent organizations that were very successful. And what we found very consistently was that those are the clients that ignored all of our advice. They didn't use any of our materials. They did things on their own. And that's a hard message to send to tell everybody,
it really is.
Everything we're doing is wrong. But because we didn't talk to customers, we created the materials we wanted to read that were about tax savings and investment options and all these very advanced features. When I did our first satisfaction study, I learned that what customers most wanted to do is figure out how to log into the website. But the most important thing we learned was that the really effective customers didn't share data. They told stories. They talked about how the health savings account allowed people to save up for a surgery that they have, allowed them to choose a health plan with lower monthly fees, which they could put more money into the account so that they would have money they need when they needed it. They told stories about the individuals as a way to engage a consumer and then presented the facts after that instead of starting with the facts.
That idea of story is so important, right?
Yeah.
And I can see that scenario taking place in the company you're describing, that we've got these great ideas. I mean, hey, I use healthcare, so I know what's right for all of my customers. They're clearly all going to think like me, working inside of this company. I'm in this boardroom. They all share my perspective. This is going to be great. And it had to have been comical and humbling at the same time to be slapped in the face with a customer saying, yeah, your stuff's that's nice and all, But when we use this, people adopt the program and are better for it and have healthier lives because they have done that. So it had to have been a bit of a wake-up call of, yeah, this didn't work so well.
Well, the most important fact was that I took my business partners with me. Mm-hmm. And so the VP of marketing got to hear firsthand from the effective programs how they communicated and totally changed the strategy based on that. And that's the power of getting out and talking to customers, is you get to learn how they are or are not using your products and how they are or not seeing success so that you can change. Now, doesn't mean you stop doing surveys. No, surveys are really important for tracking and for showing the quantitative side. An effective program does both the qualitative, the quantitative, the personal, the impersonal, all in the sense of understanding what customers need so we can drive our organization to accomplish that.
I love it. I think I almost want to, no, not almost. I'm going to have to end there because I took a look at the clock and my gosh, we're already out of time. Once again, what did I say in the intro? You and I got into a conversation. We started talking about the customer. We ran out of time. There's so much more that I'd want to ask you about. But I love the idea of ending on, look, listen to your customer. Voice of the customer. Well, that can literally mean the voice of the customer. Get out there, hug your customer, get out there and hear what they actually have to say. Not to the exclusion of any of your other customer listening posts, but the value of getting out there. And I'm sorry to say this to the Minnesotan, but get out there and hug your customer. A brilliant thing. Jim, if people want to get to know more about you, more about the services that you and your company provide, or even a little bit more about the book, how can they get in touch? Where can they find this?
Well, heartofthecustomer.com is for the site.
Okay.
Do B2BBetter.com will bring you to more about the book, as well as to the conference we're putting on in 2 weeks, October 18th, where we'll actually have the change maker speaking. We'll have somebody there from Dow. Jen is promoted, but Ricardo has taken over her role, and he was her right hand. So he's going to be speaking about how they tie to business value. Roxy will be there. Nancy will be there, as well as some other change makers talking about the real work that they're doing. So do B2BBetter.com. And lastly, of course, LinkedIn. You can always find it.
I'll get all that in the show notes, including that conference link there so that people can learn more about that. And I mean, sounds like a pleasant time to be up there anyway. So a good time of year to go check out not only the great insight there, but the great weather that you're going to experience as well. Jim, I've really enjoyed the conversation today. Thank you so much. Even if we did run long, because we always do, but I enjoyed talking with you. Thanks for the wisdom, the insight, and get out there and hug your customer, right?
You got it. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. Make sure to visit our website, cxpassport.com, where you can hit subscribe so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, you can check out the rest of the EX for CX website. If you're looking to get real about customer experience, EX for CX is available to help you increase revenue by starting to listen to your customers and create great experiences for every customer every time. Thanks for listening to CX Passport, and be sure to tune in for our next episode. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.